I'm here in the oratory of the St. John's Co-Cathedral in Valletta, in front of one of its greatest treasures, and indeed one of Malta's greatest treasures, which is the Beheading of St. John the Baptist by Caravaggio, painted in 1608. And I'm here with the curator of the cathedral, Adriana. And Adriana, I wanted to ask you how this extraordinary, perhaps the most important of Caravaggio's work, ended up in Malta.
Well, it's really an interesting journey for Caravaggio. It was 1608 when Caravaggio left Italy and arrived to Malta. And that period, Caravaggio was escaping from Rome because of the murderer of Ranuccio Tommasoni. And thanks to the relationship and the good contact between the family of Colonna and the Grand Masters of the Vigna Court, he could reach the island. And that time, Caravaggio had to try to renew his name as an artist, renew his dignity. And most probably he thought that Malta could be a good new starting point.
So it was also that idea that if he joined the Order of St. John's and became a Knight of St. John's, he would protect himself from any legal repercussions from the murder.
Exactly. I think he was thinking that benefiting from the protection of the Knights, of the Grand Masters, could maybe help himself.
Right. Right. So he was really fighting for his life in a way. And of course, this was a commission that he was asked to do for Malta and for the cathedral and for the Knights. And it is the largest work that he produced in his lifetime.
Exactly. Caravaggio, when he came to Malta, the first thing he did actually was the portrait of the Grand Master of the Vigna Court.
Which is now in the Louvre.
Exactly, yeah. That one. And I believe that the Grand Master was so fascinated of the genius of this artist that obviously he wanted him to portray the martyrdom of St. John the Baptist, which was the patron saint of the Order of the Knights. So he wanted a huge altar painting to cover in full the forehand of the oratory, that at that time was almost an empty room, a big rectangular room.
So his job really was to, or his commission was to dominate this space. And I think that, you know, just thinking about contemporary artists and what we do at MICAS, we have contemporary artists visiting us all the time and doing exhibitions with us. And I can, you know, all of the artists that we brought here, and there have been many, have been completely absorbed by this work, by the ambition of it and the extraordinary technique, because it was really breaking new ground. And all of them talk about this sense of the theatricality of it, but also the way that Caravaggio has created this sense of action and a mise en scène, but also created this empty space, which was quite unusual for him, but very unusual at the time.
Yeah. This is the power of Caravaggio's paintings. Actually, he was a revolutionary painter for the time. He painted the martyrdom of St. John's, and St. John was the precursor of Jesus Christ, so he was a revolutionary man on its own. But the power of the paintings of Caravaggio are expressed exactly by the reading of the manufacture technique and the intentions of this artist that completely changed the way of seeing and feel the art. Yeah. The Maltese works are completely different than the rest and marks a passage from the Renaissance to the Baroque art.
Yeah.
Caravaggio dominates the scene, as you said, with this painting. The scene unfolds on this new layout in an horizontal line, and the protagonists are there and illuminated by the lights that is not just there exactly to illuminate things, but to tell you exactly what really means, it's really important in that painting. Living in the darkness, the rest, that obviously create depth, and so that the figures that he intended to portray can be showed in all the power they have.
Yeah, no, it's extraordinary. And I think it's also the technique that he moves between, where John the Baptist, who is the most important protagonist within the painting, his face is rather sketchy compared to some of the other detail, like some of the hands and the face of the old woman. But St. John is, and I think that gives him a kind of sense of ethereality or perfection, that he's less detailed.
Yes. This is the realism of Caravaggio.
Of
so there is no idealizations of the saint. The body of St. John's is a body among other bodies over there, but it's the light that tell you exactly what you have to look at.
Exactly.
And it's amazing to see how the composition is done. The focal point with the executioners bent over the body of St. John's, and the other one that complete the scene.
Yeah.
So there is a sort of rereading of a traditional and narrative structures, very famous in the Renaissance time, but with the new conception.
With a new conception, which is totally dramatic.
Yeah.
But it's also that idea about, he knew it had to dominate the space, but he also had that sense of where the light was coming in, because I understand it was made for this space, but there was the light coming in behind it. And you've seen images of the picture that Reggie Burroughs-Hodges, who opens a show called Mela, which is a very common Maltese expression, that his large painting is an homage to the Caravaggio and is very much been inspired by it. And those ideas that Caravaggio had for this painting, that it must dominate a space, but also that there is this kind of source of attention coming from one side. So you've got action on one side and space on the other. That's very much prevalent in his large painting, Mama Jama. But of course, had he done it the same size as Caravaggio, in our new spaces with the massive foundation walls of the fortifications, it would have looked rather small, which is kind of a strange notion because this is such a big painting. So Reggie actually has made it almost 3 times bigger. But it's achieving the same thing. Now, you must have seen so many artists come into here. And what stories have you heard from contemporary artists and how this work has inspired them?
Well, there is one thing that usually I heard from many other comments, like that the Beheading of St. John's is a really contemporary paintings. The tragedies and the violent scene that is depicted is done in a way that it's absolutely normal. So we are normalizing something that mirror the contradiction of the modern society. This is super contemporary. The fact that is want to give us an idea of what happened at the time, here and now, that one recall the concept of visual art, contemporary art, cinema, photography, but at the same time we know we have a full theatrical scene, because if we see and read properly the painting, we can imagine what happened just a minute before of the action of the martyrdom and what's going to happen next, because of the suggestions of the movement of the young lady, very often linked to Salome, and the gestures of the jailer indicating with the finger the plate where the head will be placed in the future. So, and then there is also the expression of these figures. So the figures are there to complete an action, whilst the only one that express a sort of emotion is the old lady. That is completing and acknowledge this tragedy that is going to happen. And this is very contemporary.
It's very contemporary, because I think that the lack of emotion on the faces of the others is slightly chilling, isn't it? And it's like you talked about film, and it is like a film noir, isn't it?
Exactly.
But one of the things that so many people have said, and contemporary people have said in the past, filmmakers like Martin Scorsese and artists like David Hockney, is the cinematic quality of Caravaggio's painting. And he was it was the realism that he brings to it, and the fact that he's using ordinary people that we recognize, and we still recognize today. You know, those faces are all faces that we feel we've seen.
Yeah, yes,
They're familiar
yes.
to us.
And it's interesting because many contemporary artists, as you said, are inspired by Caravaggio.
Yeah.
But I would add that they, in a way, they reactivate the language of Caravaggio as well.
Yes.
So they give to the Caravaggio painting another life.
Exactly. They're recontextualizing it all the time. And that, in a way, is what Reggie Burroughs-Hodges has done in his painting Mama Jama. But he has taken a very Maltese scene or a Maltese sport or pastime of water polo. So you have all of this action happening on the left-hand side of the canvas, exactly the same as the Beheading of St. John by Caravaggio. And then you have this space of the water and this an invitation to contemplate the scene. And of course, it's these invitations by the artist to do two different things, to look at the action and imagine the movements, as you say, you know, as in the Caravaggio, the movements before and the movements that are going to happen afterwards. And he's got, you know, in Reggie's painting, the splashing of water, so you really kind of sense that action. But then you move out into the stillness of the water, and you're invited to kind of think more deeply and clearly about the scene. But one of the wonderful things about Reggie's huge, magnificent and highly ambitious works is that he has depicted the figure of Salome, the beautiful figure of the servant bending over with the platter, ready enthusiastically in Caravaggio's work to bear the head of St. John. Reggie has that figure right at the back of his painting. So it's a lovely connection between the two.
Yes, I think it is the direct link to the painting. I mean, the one that usually, I mean, immediately attract your attention. But yes, it's lovely to see how he got inspired.
Yes, no, it is. And of course, it kind of, it brings a different life and, as you say, a different interpretation to the Caravaggio when you see Reggie Burroughs-Hodges' modern translation of it and inspiration of it. When Reggie first came to Malta, his very first visit, where he had decided, without having visited before, that he was going to stay here and do all of the work here so he could absorb everything Maltese. On the first day, I brought him here to see this painting. And on the second, in the afternoon, I brought him to the museum, and he stood at the top floor and looked over at that wall and said, I know what I'm going to do. So it was really the starting point, which is really exciting.
I can see. Yeah.
Adriana, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. Thank you.
It was nice to speak to you.
Thank you.